Well, it's been a very challenging weekend, I think, all round in Ukraine. Mostly in the east, the Ukraine military has been under severe pressure. But what we're seeing in the Kherson region is actually some really good and positive activity by Ukraine forces. This bridge that has been taken out over the weekend has been a key focus for Russian logistics to support that area of the front. Ukraine's tried several times to deny the bridge, to take it down, but this time it's been successful, and it looks as though they have done a real job on the bridge. It doesn't look as though the Russian forces will be able to put some temporary bridge up there anytime soon. So in effect, those Russian forces are pretty much cut off, and any way of getting back or getting logistics forward are going to be very much elongated, making life very much more difficult. So I think a weekend that's been really challenging for the Ukraine forces. This is a bit of light to try and give them a bit more confidence that actually they can make progress. And if they can do this here, then presumably now that they've got US intelligence switch back on, US military capability coming back, and it will undoubtedly be either a British or American missile that's done this, then they can have confidence that they can make progress in the east, where they're under real pressure at the moment. I think psychologically it's probably the main advantage that it has. And in warfare, psychology is usually 10 to 1 the physical. So it will be a major fillip, I think, to them. Because this is, a strategic communication line. In other words, it has hugely importance, not just for this area of the front, but generally as well. And one of the major link roads and link communications capabilities for the Russians. So to see it so publicly destroyed and so comprehensively destroyed, I think will add some confidence, because we've seen that the Ukraine forces have been under severe pressure in the Kherson region and have lost quite a lot of the land that they gained in the summer. We know that the Russians are massing forces in that area for a potential assault into Sumy. And then a little bit to the south and the west, around Petrovsk and in the Donetsk. Again, the Russians have been making progress, particularly in the Petrovsk area. I was speaking to people over the weekend who were telling me they were under severe pressure, and the Russians were using, again, a lot of chemical weapons to try and advance there. So the success in the Kherson region will be good. And the fact that it has been so widely covered on social media and the media, I think will give the people in the country, a little bit of a fillip when they feel that with all that's happening about the ceasefire and the toings and froings between Moscow and Washington, one can see that they might not be quite so confident. But this is an important piece, and let's hope they can build on it. Well, I think in that area of the front, the contact line, it will take considerable pressure off, and that hope may well be allow Ukraine to focus elsewhere, where they're under much more pressure, as I've said, in the east and in the Kherson region. So if they can focus their key weaponry, some of their key long-range precision missiles like Storm Shadow and Taurus in that area, then it means that hopefully they can hold the Russian advances there and get themselves in a better position. Because it's clear what the Russians are trying to do at the moment is to really get as much land as they can, put as much pressure on Ukraine ahead of any ceasefire discussions, so that Russia is in a much better position. And President Putin believes he's winning. President Putin still believes that he can take the whole of Ukraine. And it's very important that those of us in the West who are supporting Ukraine make sure that that does not happen, and also make sure that whatever ceasefire negotiations, whatever comes to fruition, are something that the Ukraine people can agree and can accept. So it's a good thing for the Ukraine forces that they are having success in some areas to try and counter where they're not being quite successful in others. In warfare, you always want to attack your enemies, what we call lines of communication. These are roads, railways, or air links where ammunition and food and all the materiel of warfare have to move. Now, if you can cut the lines of communication, particularly as far back as possible, as been described before, it's like cutting a head off a snake. And if a snake loses its head, it's useless. So that is the idea, to try and cut these lines of communication. And there are a lot of bridges in the whole area of the contact line, across some of the great rivers and tributaries that Russia has to move across. So by targeting them, it makes an awful lot of sense. And if you can destroy the bridge fully, as we saw in Kherson over the weekend, it makes it very difficult for the Russians to repair or find alternative routes to the front. And that is the key thing. And I think when one also considers the amount of material, the amount of ammunition that has been used in this warfare, it requires constant filling up along those lines of communication. So if Russia can't get ammunition to the front line, it will very quickly run out. And this is a war of attrition, almost like the First World War. And though the side who has the most ammunition and soldiers at the moment is the one prevailing. And that is why Russia has had successes over the last few months, because it seems to have an endless supply of conscripts, be they Russians or North Koreans, that they can just throw into what we call the meat grinder. And they seem to have an endless supply of ammunition, artillery fire, and bullets that they can keep pounding away at the Ukraine front lines. Now, if that supply can be affected in any way, that will affect the front. So that is why it's so key that the lines of communication are cut. That's why it's so keen that weapons like the American ATACMS and HIMARS missiles, which we understand are in short supply at the moment, and the British Storm Shadow, these precision weapons that can take bridges out, take railway out, way behind the front lines, are so important. But recently, Ukraine has suffered because it lost that key American intelligence for a few weeks. And that intelligence is providing the exact sort of grid references, coordinates that Ukraine needs to use to be able to take these out. So it is a very significant part of the battle. And at the end of the day, if a soldier doesn't have any bullets, he can't fight. And that is what Ukraine's trying to do, starve the Russian front line of bullets. And by taking out these key bridges, that is the most effective way of doing it. Also, what we see Ukraine doing, attacking ammunition dumps in Crimea and elsewhere with great regularity, which means that the Russians have to push them further and further back from the front lines, which again makes them more vulnerable. So this is a key part of warfare, not just in the Ukraine. It's ever been the case back to when time began. So it's a very effective way of fighting, and let's hope that Ukraine can carry on being successful in this endeavor.